Greetings, folks. No, season's greetings. All right. So, bit of an update because you might be thinking, oh no, he keeps doing review videos. Get back to the typology. Maybe you should call it classology because I think it's better to speak of a psychological class than a psychological type because it is about classification. And type can be rather static. If we think about it, I think it's people who resemble certain types, certain classes might tend to think deductively, this is like, well, because this person is this and then that, and that can be a problem. So in building this, these are some of the areas where I'm going to sort of be thinking about this. I think I might do it on typewriter. There's a few distractions. So the main ideas in this model that I've got there is two things to sort of get across, because the other stuff is, and I'll do it this way. Should I go full? I'll put it back a little bit. So the main idea in this to get across and to really go into detail, although it should be self-explanatory, is the idea of a default field of consciousness versus a situational field of consciousness. And the idea there is that extroversion and introversion, it really is a verb. It's extroverting and introverting. There's 4 different kinds of extroverting and introverting. So when we classify somebody as an extrovert, it's their preference is to extrovert. So we can say that is their default state, extroverting. And then what do we mean by extroverting? Well, they're going towards the empirical data, the actual sensory data, the SE. Now, also, you see, there's the thing. That's an issue with what you call it. If you just call it sensation, then there's a tendency to think, oh, just the sensory data. It's just sensory. It's not just sensing. It's instinct. Instinctum. And this comes from, and I'll mention the name, this comes from the 1930s typologist, died in 1950, Vanderhoop. And he reconceptualized, he looked at the sensation type and he said, there's more going on here than sensation. And when he wrote a description of the type, he said their adaptation, and he reconceptualized functions as forms of adaptation and as fields of consciousness. He's very much interested in phenomenology of Vanderhoop. And Vanderhoop's been an influence on this model in that, so you can see here with the club functions, he wrote that was he had the nucleus and the counter nucleus of consciousness. And his nucleus for, say, an INTP would be, I'll be reluctant to talk about Vanderhoop. You can sort of see he described himself as an introvert of thinking type with subsidiary intuition. So it's not just me that's... So you want to see Vanderhoop's model of INTP. Probably the first person to do an 8-function model. Yeah. There we go. Now look which functions are in the main field of consciousness. It's the NT functions. And then the counter nucleus, it's the SF functions. And so he's big on the clubs. So now also look here about the development access. So it's about how the inferior function manifests. In cases where conflicts in feeling are under control of repressed complexes, an obsessional neurotic character may be developed. That's how many people interpret the inferior function. But here we go, it's about development. And Dario Nardi has gone into this about the synergetic integration. But where there is greater freedom in thought, we get a morality founded on principles and reasons, capable of giving rise to fresh insight into life and thing. So can be integrated. So, and you notice how he's done the field of consciousness for introverting is larger within this diagram of the introvert. So it's where attention is paid is on the subjective reaction of the forms of adaptation. So his diagram for the extrovert is the field is wider for the default field of consciousness. So that's the default field of consciousness is that larger room. And then the default field of consciousness is the inner world, the reactions, or rather the subjective reactions to the various functions. So we go back here. And so he would, again, the will to right behavior, and I'm going to give you the function definitions. So the unknown self, look at that. That there's access to the unknown self and access to the unknown world, the frontiers. So, but let's get on to the way he divided it up. Now, what he meant here by impulse was impulse to habit. There. World as possibilities. Inspiration. World as obligation. Very particular view of FE. Now, Tamsi agrees with that. Now, if someone doesn't see it like that, if you've got an IEI who doesn't see it like that, then they might be more like an ISFP in KBN. World is given, impulse, but again, impulse to instinct. Objectified, will to control via systematization. Now, is that the case for ISTP though? That might be INTP bias. When these INTPs write about TI, they tend to write about TI as they use it. So, no viewers. I wonder why. I am public. I think I'm public. Right. So this is influenced model Vaserlan. So this isn't just coming out of nowhere. I wanted to keep Van der Hoek quiet, but I also want to be honest about where the influences are coming from. So you can see there that you can say, so I put in here, I used to have on this graphic nucleus and counter nucleus. And I thought, well, it's a little bit like complicated. People don't need to know that. But we know the club. So again, we can say the club is consistent with Van der Hoek. And also we can say it's consistent with modulatives, where you've got the ego row, and at the bottom, the id row is the two strong rows. So we've got this within field of consciousness. Now, Dario Nardi's data, if you get his book, The Magic Diamond, you'll see information on his data. And he's also posted it on his LinkedIn. He's put up an appendix. So, and he's written a paper in the past called Wisdom of the Sixth Function. That's in the Beebe model. So in the Beebe model, it would be here, the sixth function. and how this can be, and how this can develop. So, and he's also written about, basically you can synergize with the dominant. And so, if someone's classified as a rational type, then all of the rational functions can synergize with the lead. So getting back to, and so that's why I'm emphasizing the clubs. Now also, you regular viewers of this channel will know that I am very much influenced by Kersey temperament theory, because I see it as the most empirical of the typologies, because words and tools, what people say, and that can be analyzed. There's a lot that can come from words, especially if one is attentive to context, and you can see, is this person talking in the jargon of their context? So for instance, say someone is an instincting type, a sensing type. What is their attitude towards abstractions? Are they interested in abstractions for their own sake? Now, also, NTJs tend not to be as interested in abstractions for their own sake. And so then you can start looking at things like tactical versus strategic. There are all these things in Kersey temperament model. And again, from an empirical level, if you can have a deepish talk with somebody, you can get towards their motivations, and those motivations are real. Their actions and their word usage is real. So you can get a sort of a psychological complex. So it's about as real as you're going to get in terms of someone's intelligent actions and their sort of motivational complex, especially if you combine, if you have an idea of somebody's Kersey temperament and their Enneagram fixation. Yeah, I tend to view Enneagram types as fixations, and to think of them as fixations, because I'm not sure it's necessarily healthy to base a type around a fixation. Because then somebody sort of, are they judging their own development based on how fixated they are? It's just that little bit narrow, in my opinion, just a little bit dangerous. So, getting back to field of consciousness. So if someone is, if their default field of, so the idea there is default versus situational. And this is a bit of a big difference from Model G, where Model G would have the top row as the societal row. So the implication being there that the introvert, for example, contributes to society in an introverted, that it would be an introverted role. Well, that's tricky, because it fluxes depending on the activity. And if you've got an INTP riding a horse, then it's going to, you better be in a state of extroverting. So, and that is similar in Kersey. And so one of the things I once looked at was role of, say, modest servant in the Kersey roles. So I made a list in this book here. Good book, this. My Christmas present to you is telling you about this book. Instinct and Intuition by George Binney Dibley. So, if we find all right, so the fourth, if you think, so when you think of sensing, think instinct, and for instinct, think seek. sensation, emotional reactions bound up with those sensations, such as, oh, that feels nice, oh, that tastes nice, and how that is then linked to certain actions that can be accompanied from the sensation almost instantaneously, all bound up in an instinctual level, and then a certain kind of knowing. Now, we could almost describe this as a subcortical kind of knowing, and look at that in future about more stuff with the brain and the thalamus and the limbic system, and how there is a separation between, but what this view of, and this is something I've got from Van der Hoop, is this realization of that by putting emotion in with sensation and forming instinct, is then separating emotion from feelings. And this then leads to nuanced analysis of what's going on in terms of like certain internal states. Van der Hoop was very much interested in his subjective experience of various forms of adaptation. And so, and again, making distinguish between an emotion and a feeling. And when you get with a feeling state is you get a combination of emotions, or where the emotion is affected by thinking. Now, this, you got to think about, in all of these things I say, what is it based on? What is it consistent with that's proper, that's more legitimate, that's more scientifically validated? So, for example, cognitive behavioral therapy is based on a model of how thinking and feeling affect each other, and with the physical sensations involved as well. So if you're coming up with a theorizing the relationship between thinking and feeling, I think it's best not to contradict CBT when it's got 50,000 studies of people through their therapy writing down what they were thinking and feeling while they were doing particular things. And so there's a huge amount of data available from CBT over the last 50 years of the relationship between thinking and feeling. Now, someone who resembles a six is, and I know this is the case with me, is very ambivalent feelings. And so the line is blurred a lot between thinking and feeling. This might have something to do with my accentuated FI. So I don't think it's, so when you're sort of like coming up with the social role, so for example with it's to say social, it's like if you were to say the social role of INTP is TI with NI. Well, really it's TI with both, because it's and I'll give you examples here of the creative function with the tactical. So it's like if ESTP is going towards the expediter, someone who can expedite a solution, like these inventive solutions, it's not just SE with TI, but it's with TE as well. Or you can say with ESTJ that it's TE and SI plus SE, assertive SE, and that gets onto subfunctions, where in contrast to Victor Galenka, I have removed the normalizing subfunction and have three subfunctions: assertive, creative if it's extroverting, imaginative if it's introverting. So assertive, creative, imaginative, that's one. And the third one is normalizer. And you can go through all 8 functions and you can see these subfunctions. And this helps to explain how Socionics and Western type concentrate on different aspects of extroverted and introverted instinctum. So Socionics will tend to concentrate on the assertive subfunction of extroverted instinctum, because that's part of the instinct that's related to aggression and competition. Again, instinct. What is And it's related. And Kersey, because he wasn't using functions, he captured the instinct of artisans. It's all in there. In artisan, trusting impulse, value being excited, self-image, artistic, audacious, adaptable, audacious. So there's an audacity there, and a bravery, and and value being stimulated. This is all part of the instinct. This is not just empirical sensor. There's a whole instinct behind it. And I like how Dario calls SI. What does he call SI? Cautious protector. That's a whole instinct behind it. That's a whole motivational complex, a whole motivational context that the function is used in. Cautious protector. And the impulse there is to have it. They yearn to belong. And the trust authority. This is all part of the instinct of SI. And these are sort of two evolutionary strategies in human beings. The two sort of competing that are being selected for. And it was Robert Winston that I heard this from. So you've got the strategy of human beings, competition. So you can say that's with the extroverted sensor. The competitive strategy. The downside of that is you can piss other people off. The other strategy, cooperation. So you can see how artisans have gone down the route of competition, and guardians have gone down the route of cooperation. And then you get this dichotomy in Kersey, utilitarian versus cooperative. And the utilitarian is more cooperative, more competitive. Now, that dichotomy doesn't work as well amongst intuiting types, but if you nuance it, and it gets very nuanced with idealists, because for them it's not so much about compliance with social norms as consensus. They still want people to get with the program. Look at many of the politics of idealist types, and things will come through. Now, not all idealists are of that bent. I mean, for example, R-Dub is a libertarian, but a lot of them will have politics based around consensus, and they want people to get with the program. So the relationship of idealists between the individual and the group is interesting. There's some contradictions and tensions going on there. Like certain spheres would be more cooperative and certain spheres would be more individualistic. And so you can get these contradictions where from a libertarian point of view, you could look and go, but you're not consistent there. Why in this area are you wanting people to get with the program and do as they're told? And then there's this other area you expect people to sort of do their own thing. So you can get these inconsistencies because there's these tug of war between different impulses within idealists. There is that cooperative aspect of idealists, but there's also, with all idealists, all NFs, they have strong FI. They're going to come out in idiosyncratic ways. Whereas for artisans, it's more clear that they are individualistic. So, right. I am a libertarian, so I will. I'll come at it from this point of view of it. We tend to get a lot of that with, say, ENFP. People who resemble ENFP. They might be the least consistent when it comes to, because they might talk about, hey, I want to do my own thing. And then you say something, so you want to be a libertarian then? Right. Then. But again, we've got these competing demands. This is just me waffling on. So, field of consciousness. Oh yes, semiotics. So, semiotics, I have a beef with modulators and their information view of socionics, which is, in my opinion, just a little bit ignorant. So if you had to divide up information and say, for example, that intuition and feeling are internal and sensing and thinking are external, right? So it's almost as if they're not going to have empirical and subjective from extroverting and introverting. So it's like they're going to have all thoughts as external. And as Jack said in his debate with Eric, thinking doesn't need to be interpreted. Oh, really? Really? Well, there's a whole subject out there called semiotics, which sort of says, yes, it does need to be reinterpreted. Yes, it does. Because people don't communicate their thoughts. They communicate symbols of their thoughts, words. So, for example, I did an event recently where I did how I experience FI. And what I mean by empathy is different from what Wojciech means by empathy. So that is proof that my thought did not go directly from my mind into Wojciech's unaltered. There is reinterpretation. Semiotics. Semiotics will severely debunk the information theory of modulators. And it might be this information theory, which is why the Russian Academy of Sciences has classified socionics as a pseudoscience. It's because of the information aspect. So, in semiotics, you got the early model, you had Saussure, you had the signifier and the signified. So, for example, signifier, empathy, word, meaning. Now, then you've got, is it Jacques Derrida? And then talk about semantic slippage. The meanings of words can change, and then words in different contexts. And then also, what do we have? Now, there was a semiotician. I've actually forgotten the exact relationship between semiotics and semiology. Right. Because before I was interested in socionics and typology, I was interested in postmodernism and post-feminism and other aspects of philosophy. So from a semiotics point of view, what I think it's Charles Sanders Peirce came up with is he had the representamen, that's the sign. And then you have three kinds of sign. You had the icon, which is sort of like it pictographically resembles what it's representing. You had the symbol, where there was an arbitrary relationship between the signifier and the signified. So if I say, what does the word sabaka mean? It's just arbitrary. Well, we don't know. It doesn't tell us anything. Well, it's Russian for dog. And again, if someone says dog, they picture in their mind maybe a certain kind of dog with the other somebody else, but there's loads of different kinds of dog. It's not transferred. So the internal, external thing of thoughts, well, that's just gone out of the window. Someone can say a foreign word and I don't understand it instantly, but I could argue that someone's facial expression is more transferable between people between different cultures, and that is what Paul Ekman showed, where he distinguished between a gesture, which is culture specific, and a facial expression, and he studied tribes which were cut off from influences from other cultures had the same facial expressions as other human beings. There's a universality there, and you have the facial action coding system. And if you want to know more about Ekman, there was a series that he was involved with called Lie to Me. So I would argue that is more empirical than thought, which has to be which does have to be reinterpreted because it's language. What else? So yeah, so then you've got the index, where it's a sign of something and it's causally linked. So smoke is an index of fire. And then you've got, in this relationship of the representative, the sign, and then icon, simage, icon, symbol, index, that's the sign. So you've got the sign and the object it refers to, and then you've got the interpretant. So, and linguistics would show you that, you see what I mean? Like, everyone, this is what people know, that word is not a one-to-one translation between the signifier and the signified, that there is slippage. This means that a key concept from Jungian typology, the objective and the subjective, but what he meant by objective was empirical, because there's different kinds of objective. You could say the only thing that's really objective is logic. It doesn't require your observation. It's only really logic is objective. And also logic, in my book, would be an example of non-verted thinking. It is neither empirical nor subjective. So we can tell that even in what I'm saying here, there's what I mean by it, and it's like, you know empirically what the words mean, but there's going to be a difference between your understanding of what I'm saying and what I mean right now, because all the frame of reference is different. You're going to know things I don't know. So then there's not that transference. So what does that say then about this internal external dichotomy? Well, it's made up. So this internal external thing, but I would argue emotions on someone's face is more transferable, that information, than say the meaning of the word empathy, or even in the word dog. What kind of dog? What kind of horse? These are abstractions. These are words. So if you're having a theory of information that contradicts proper subjects such as linguistics and semiotics, you're on pretty shaky ground. Because if you're going with internal external, then what you are saying is, you are saying there is no subjective factor in sensing because it's external, and no subjective factor in thinking because it's external. But that's not true. That contradicts so much philosophy and so much proper subjects. Or even subjects such as, I've got two books, Science Fiction Audiences, Understanding Star Trek and Doctor Who. What is that about? It's about people having different readings of a television program because they're interested in different things. They're getting different things out of it. References are going to go above somebody's head, and then other people are going to read things differently. Same thing in Doctor Who, the unfolding text. All these different codes put in there. There is obviously an empirical part and a subjective part. You can watch something that you watched 10 years ago, and you watch it now, and you experience it differently. That difference then comes under the subjective factor. The subjective factor cannot be ignored. or it can be, but I think it's not very wise to do so. So Jung built this into his model. There's the empirical and there's the subjective. So the idea then being that when in a state of introverting as a verb, that the introvert, which is someone who is predisposed to introverting, but they're not always introverting, is to their subjective reactions to. So David Mark Kersey recently said to me that he finds it difficult to read stuff now because he just sort of goes off in his own mind. He's like into his own thoughts as to what he thinks about it rather than somebody else's opinion. And this is happening. How often do those people who you would pretty confidently classify as like INTP, how often do they take somebody else's model and change it up and their own opinion, their own subjective factor, their own interpretation come on it? Vanderhoop classified himself as an introvert of thinking type with subsidiary intuition. He reframed Jung's work. He said, I don't like that definition of instinct, of sensation. I'm going to reframe it as instinct. He looks at his relationship between value and feeling. And he thought, hang on a minute, other functions can also value. But feeling is the one that's most important with valuation. Because other functions value things, like extroverted instinct in values competition. You could say that extroverted, that in a state of extroverted intuiting, that you are valuing novelty and possibility, that these other functions value things, and it's not just FI, not just feeling that's related to valuing. So again, thinking for themselves. And then Kersey, he looks at Jung's work, doesn't agree with it. But again, there's context there because it was against the Freudians. And then Behrens very much follows Kersey's work, but then she also likes Jung and then combines it. So these INTPs, INTP resemblers, their subjective factor is right there. They think differently. And again, there's another bit of evidence that this is why people need to understand vertness. They need to understand the subjective factor. And once they understand the subjective factor, which is there, I've just proven it's there in language. Language is an empirical part of language, and then there's a subjective part. Just like with, say, aesthetics, you can say that there is the empirical part of aesthetics, and then there's also beauty is in the eye of the beholder. There's a subjective factor there. So when somebody is in a state of extroverting, they are more towards the empirical aspect. So in a state of instinctum, sensum, it's more the actual sensory qualities than the subjective reaction to it. Now, Vanderhoop brought in another idea of, because emotion was bound up with sensation, he then thought, does that mean the subjective aspect is more than in the emotional reactions to the stimulus? So to that extent, is an SI DOM have more an emotional reaction than an SE DOM? Well, you would have to compare it based on experiences, and it's like and then trying to make the distinction between the experience, the thrill, and then any emotion reacted to that. What did I talk about? The sort of like the fighting spirit, like someone who's like in that state, an assertive subfunction of extroverted instincting, where and the adrenaline high, the adrenaline junkie, even though that might not be a simplification, but people know what they mean by adrenaline junkie. people who like the thrill of battle and stuff like that. That's all part of the experience. Who is divine strength? Happy. Oh, thank you. Well, could you please elaborate on? So, what are your demographics? Divine strength. You know mine. You can see me and hear me. So, who is divine strength? Anything. Right. Well, Vanderhoop's got a very good section on the key features of intuitor. And then so has Dibblee. The Dibblee contrasts lots of different sources and thoughts on how instinct was thought of and how intuiting was thought of. And so the basic difference between the two is, and also by reframing sensing, reconceptualizing sensing as instinct, it puts instinct on the same level, puts instincting on the same level as intuiting. So we can say that instincting relates to the concrete and intuiting relates to the abstract. Now, I do believe there are some people out there who are abstract, but not necessarily intuitive. But I tend to have a creative bias. So if you hear a certain ENTP person who's interested in typology, and you can see that this person is very much interested in ideas, and they stick to somebody else's model, and you don't actually hear them coming up with their own ideas, then is that person as intuitive as, say, another ENTP that is coming up and making their own connections and ideas and things and theories? Are they as intuitive? They're just as abstract, but is the person that's just interested in ideas as intuitive as the person that's also interested in ideas, say another ENTP, but they're coming up with their own theories? Or am I making too much of a complex equivalence between creativity and intuiting? And I also think that you can get, say, an ISFP can have moments of intuiting that are stronger than, say, abstract type. So those two are very much connected together, intuiting and abstract, and concrete and instincting. But what we got to think about is, and that is why diagnostically, Kersey would look at abstract speech for intuiting types and concrete speech for sensing types, instincting types. So the assumption there being that someone's speech is concrete because their thinking is concrete. Now, again, not surface analysis, looking at the context in which people use speech. So, for example, you could have an instincting type, a concrete type, that's in a field such as science or information technology, where their jargon is abstract. But then again, is it that abstract if it's like the actual things that they are interested in? SI. Well, that's the thing with SI. SI is damn tricky, because this is how subfunctions can help with SI. So Socionics concentrates on the comfort sensing aspect of SI. That is definitely in Kersey's Guardians. They want to help. The helpmates. The SFJs are predisposed towards provider roles, provider supplier, provider protector. Jeff's quote, Guardians will tell you about their medical problems. The number of Kersey wrote, most physicians are guardians. He wrote about doctors and nurses. He wrote about hospitals being the natural habitat of guardians. I think my own GP is ESFJ, like. Then there's other kinds of protecting. So the instinct, and as Dario calls it, cautious protecting. So that part of it is there, but there's a motivational context, and that's something I got from Linda Behrens, that she, in combining Kersey and Jung, wrote about the temperament context in which functions are used. Now, this also can be explained by model A blocking, such as Fi with Se is different from Fi with Any. But you could also understand it as Fi in artisan is different from Fi in idealist. Okay, so perception, yeah, this is something else to look at. Again, looking at proper subjects, another proper subject, cognitive psychology. I've got 3 books on cognitive psychology. So Van der Hoop wrote that perception was a circumscribed cognitive process. So within perception, you have recognized an object. Well, if you've recognized an object, you're in the area of thought. You're not just in, say, a situation where everything is completely strange and you've never seen it before and you can't really perceive and categorize and recognize anything. But if you recognize stuff, then that's gone over into the realm of thought. That's a quarter of cognitive psychology. Perception and attention and object recognition and all these sorts of things. Because cognitive psychology got about 4 areas, and I've got 2 different books on it, and one of them puts concepts with memory, because they talk about semantic memory. They put concepts with memory. The other one puts concepts with language. So, like I said, if I say dog, there's a certain concept of what a dog is. There's various different shapes and sizes of dog. So I would probably put concepts next to language, and then you've probably got to think about, well, can you have a concept outside of language? Well, maybe. So the raw sensory experience is different from perception. So I agree with Van der Hoop. It's a circumscribed cognitive process. That's what he wrote, and that is what cognitive psychology agrees with. A circumscribed cognitive process that interprets what it sees. So, for example, you see these symbols. You interpret what they mean. They are symbols. You recognize the letter. So, and something that Van der Hoop wrote, that the sphere of instincting, we call it the sphere of instinct, but you see, other functions make use of the material of instinct. So, separate perception from sensor, and then that lines up with cognitive psychology. So, because he said that he wanted to separate, he said that because he put emotion in with sensation to form instinct, that he no longer would consider instinct a function of perception, because he thought that perception is, he wrote this, perception is related to thought, since by it truth is tested, because you can make an observation. Anyhow, we're all over the place. Semiotics, I mentioned before. The memory of an area. Yeah, you said because language, you got semantic drift. And again, there's other one, like Amanda's read. Amanda knows a lot about Wittgenstein. She was able to convince me ISTP is best fit for Wittgenstein. So if you look at Wittgenstein and you look at Derrida, then and the way they see language works. Like I said, it makes a mockery of, say, Model 80's socionics. If people describe thinking as objective, I'm like, what? Yeah, what? Like, you know, there's a subjective factor. Like, even right now, you ask me what I mean. That's because it's not going straight from my mind to yours. It has to be reinterpreted. What else? So again, this, so Jung, I believe, was right with the subjective factor. The subjective factor within the introverts. However, just as long face of the SLI, you see, there's a little bit of an issue there, is how to categorize SLI in KBN. Because I would argue there's some contradictory things going on there with okay, so many people who would be classified as SLI would be classified as ISTP in KBN, Kurzgesagt-Nardi. And the thing is, Kurzgesagt-Nardi ISTPs, so Dario would type them by temperament, interaction style, maybe a functional assessment like keystocognition.com. And when you do the EEG, all of the rational types in Kurzgesagt-Nardi all got more activity in FP1 than FP2. But if you're classifying someone as SLI, and I've got the EEG data, so Farah on the channel classified as SLI, would be classified as SLI in Socionics, an irrational type. What does the brain data show? More activity in FP1, consistent with ISTP, lead rational type. So that's one bit of evidence. Another bit of evidence that Socionics has got SLI and SLI the wrong way around. Another bit of evidence, intertype relations. Just ask people in MBTI, ask the ENFPs how they get on with ISTJs and ISTPs. Carol Linden was at a conference. She got ISTJ mother, so she doesn't see the attraction. They asked the ENFPs in the audience how many are married to ISTJs, and like 8 of them put their hands up. Also, you can look at compare mirrors. Look at the difference between ESTJ and SLI. It's a massive difference. Or look at the difference between SLE and LSI. Then it's like you're going to say, oh, LSI, this ISTJ. So you've got an ESTP and an ISTJ, and you're saying they're in the same quadrant. And this is because of the mistakes made with how you conceptualize TI and the context in which it's used. So if you understand functions, so this is why there's a problem with sensory interests in Socionics, is there's little errors in definitions. And also, here's another piece of evidence. Now, this is a little bit circumstantial, but it's, I think, convincing. Why do you think Victor Galenka come up with a subtype system where the sensory introverts show the biggest difference across subtypes? So, for example, LSI normalizing, LSI at the whole type profile reads like a KBN ISTJ, SITX. He's even called the inspector. Normalizing subtype will be extra ISTJ. What does a creative subtype read like? It reads like an ISTP. It even mentions martial arts and car parts in their yard to repair. So it's like all of the stereotypes of the KBN ISTP mechanic. And you read the profile of the Galenka LSI, creative subtype, and it reads like an ISTP. And the normalizing subtype is completely like ISTJ. That huge difference between subtypes. And you get that with the sensory introverts. You don't get that with the other types. So there's circumstantial evidence. So you need to look at the evidence and think for yourself as to is if we're saying that this person is, say, SLI in Socionics or LSI in Socionics, you then need to look at what their intertype relations are like and see if it plays out right. Or maybe it's like, oh, I don't think this person's categorized right, because this person that's classified as because just do your own research. Ask people in MBTI, like, say, like, go in an ISTP group, ask them what they think of ENFPs, ask ENFPs what they think of ISTPs, and the way they talk about those types is consistent with them being conflictors. But that type, that the ISTP that they don't like, would be classified as an SLI in Socionics, which is theoretically their dual. So you see what I mean? You can go through all of these patterns and, again, think for yourself, come to your own conclusions, and about, oh, maybe they're not defining the functions quite right. Now, I know why this has happened with Victor's system, and that is because he's very much into temperament in that. And so the explanation from a humanitarian socionics point of view is to the mirror pairs. Why is SLE so different from LSI? Well, because SLE is EP, flexible active, and LSI is IJ, balanced stable. So they would say it was a difference in temperament or mindset, as I call it. KBN, Kersey, Berens, Nardi, Van der Hooven. But I find nothing. I also think that Shotgun Fingers on the 16 types is SEI, Glenka types is LSI. Well, maybe. Anyway, it's Van der Hooven. No. Kersey, Berens, Nardi. I really didn't want to mention it because I wanted to do a functions book and mention him, but Van der Hoop. There you go. Van der Hoop. Because I didn't want to, although I didn't want to mention Van der Hoop because I wanted to mention it in a book, I also didn't want to pass off his ideas as my own. And I thought, actually, I'd rather not do that. I don't want to be a victim of that. I always want to say where it's an idea that I've learned from somewhere else, and then when it's my own opinion. I want to be as honest about where stuff is coming from. Shotgun is IP. Right. Yeah, and that's something else as well. Like, if you have a temperament system where all the IP... So again, it's these little things. And if you know Kersey temperament, then you tend not to get into these problems. So I can prove... Well, I can show. I'll show on screen Dario Nardi's definitions of extrovert, of SE and SI, and I can show you the instinctive aspect of that. Right. Jungian compatible. Nardi. 8 keys. Wait a minute. Scans. My self-assessment scores. Okay, let's go to SE, or extroverted instincting, as I call it. Right. There's a load here that's related. There's more than just... Now, all of this, and I've actually shown this to... Wait a minute, pause. This slide show. Right. So I actually showed this to... It's going again. Right, where's SE? Is that one where I've got 1 out of 16? Yeah. Again, all of this is the temperament. So we've got here, I mean, obviously here, follow your gut instincts. That's more than just sensation. Instincts. Instantly read visible cues to see just how far you can go. Again, that's more than just sensation. There's a motivational configuration going up behind there to see just how far you can go. So they want to see how far they go. They want to test boundaries. That's motivational. That goes. That's more than just the sensing. There's a motivational complex there. This is basically, because Dario was taught by Linda Behrens and Linda Behrens by Kersey Sr., then his definition of SE is basically, it's like a cologne, essence of artisan. But from this, we can see the instinctive aspect of SE. Seek, sensing, emotion, action, and then a kind of knowing, a kind of kinesthetic, subcortical maybe knowing. Quickly move to take advantage of immediate options. Again, there's motivation there. Tactical intelligence. Again, this is measuring how artisan someone is. Easily get in sync physically with people and things around you. Get in sync. Maybe that's the knowing part. The intellect. Right. Become totally absorbed as you move, touch, and see what's around you. So that's the immersing in the present context. I wonder if I can break this down by subfunctions. Okay. Spur action and get results simply by making your presence felt. So that's the bit of extroverted sensing that Socionics concentrates on. The forsensorics, the assertive subfunction of extroverted instinctor. It's part of the instinct. Enjoy the thrill of action and physical experience in the present moment. Again, part of the temperament in the moment. So you can see here, there's more going on than just sensor. There's a whole motivational configuration associated with it. And that is, and if you want to know more about that, read Kersey's chapter on the artisans in Please Understand Me Too. And again, this is Dario's definition, and this has been, it's playing again. I shouldn't press that button. Is this, no, that's SE. Is this my SI? Right, here we go. This sort of, it gone around again. That's not right. Hey, no. Is that it? Right. SI. Because there's a lot here that because you might think there, follow the work, ideas, and example of others who come before you. You might be thinking, what's that got to do with sensor? That's the temperament. That's the instinct. Notice whether details in front of you match what you are accustomed to. So again, becoming accustomed to something, instinct to habit. That's what Van der Hoop wrote, instinct to habit. I'll read out a bit of his SI Dom profile and you'll hear how Guardian it sounds. Again, customary standard, accustomed, customary standard, what came before you. Feeling inclined to put the stop to something new to your experience. Again, that's part of the instinct. Point out discrepancies with how things are and the way they used to be. Again, it's all of the instinct of the Guardian. It's the Guardian. So it's like, again, this is essence of Guardian. In emergencies, trust solutions that have stabilized the situation in the past. And again, that's part of the instinct. To stabilize. To stabilize. Whereas the instinct of artisans is more towards excitement and stimulation and trusting impulse. Comparing experience against a storehouse of familiar experiences to find out what's reliable. Now, NE is going to be involved in there, because you've got the perception of similarities. Put Perform the same regular work or activity every day as an even comfortable pace. Comfortable pace. So a little bit of comfort sensing in there. Not just because of the word, but like if you're going at a comfortable pace, then they're not overstraining themselves. And they're sort of like a marathon runner, not sort of leaving stuff to the last moment and overstressing themselves. Right. Maybe I could show the was it the Van der Hoop bit on? I've got it. If I read the bit out where it sounds Guardian. What about, talks about semiotics, it's all about, what else have we got? Maybe I'll put the model on screen. Van der Hoop's model. Now I've come out about Van der Hoop. Let's put him on screen. Right. Book scans and screen grabs. Van der Hoop on functions. Is this the SI DOM profile? Have I scanned it all? Oh, okay. I'll put his share screen. I'll put his profile on. I'll get to the bit where he talks about instinct. Introverted instinctive type. Now, where does it get all guardian-y? Right, here we go. Page 32. Right. Back in motives. Is it here? Yeah, here we go. The development of reason also follows the same line here as the general attitude to life. Facts are its points of departure, and particularly certain fundamental facts, which are subjected to exact and thorough investigation. It's just writing about the SI DOM. There is nothing contemplative about people of this type. Moreover, well, compared to you're an INTP, extreme INTP. He's very much interested in phenomena. He was extra contemplative, Van der Hoop. Moreover, they prefer to stick to the familiar and find it difficult to adopt anything new. This is connected to bring themselves to... If they can bring themselves to accept anything new, they tend to occupy themselves with it until it becomes absolutely clear to them. Obstinacy of instinct is ever renewed attack until it's learned to control its object. He mentions something about a farmer doing something in the same old way. All right. Caring for the animals. Here we go. Children of this type are frequently noted for a certain gentleness and receptiveness, timidity and reserve. Anything strange or new has at first no attraction for them. They offer little active resistance to it and soon learn to accept it. Right. Reserved, quite somewhat passive, only in rare cases. Such as artists, yes, there's this distinctive and personal quality of their inner emotion come to expression. In other cases, yeah, but a lot of them keep quiet about that aspect. I know quite a few ISFJ resemblers, but they are the ISFJ resemblers interested in typology that write poetry. Might mention something about the farmer. Here we go. The advantages and disadvantages of this type are well brought out in the reserved and conservative farmer, with his care for his land and his beasts, and his tendency to carry on everything down to the smallest detail in the same old way. Yes. So basically, this is Guardian. This type is Guardian. Now, I will say, to be fair, that his extroverted instincting type is not as artisan as it should be, which annoyed me because I like things to neatly line up. But it's mostly there. What have we got here? Anyhow, what was I going to show? Right, I want to show Van der Hoop on functions. Where's his model? Is that on functions? Would that be on functions? Is that... No, it'd be on the end. Right, where's his model then? Instants and instincting types. Oh, right. I could show that. Yeah, I'll show you that. I'll show you the features. Because I mentioned this earlier on. the 4 features of instinct. When did I scan this? Right. Okay. Well, what I'm going to do, instead of reading it out, just ask you to pause it. And I'm going to wait 5 seconds. I'm going to give you the time to pause this. Right. Move on to the next one. Pause it. Emotion, and what have I made any notes on this? Well, I have made quite a few card notes actually. Actually, I might as well show my card notes. Certain mode of behavior determined more or less by habit. There you guardians. And then the kind of knowing. This is very interesting. Should I put my cards on screen? Yes, I'll put my cards on screen. Right. Book scan, screen grabs, index card notes. Right. All my, what have we got here? Feeling, function, perception, relation between things. What's this? Is that? Well, let's get perception on there. Share screen. Right. Right. Because I had begun to regard emotion as an expression of instinct, I was no longer able to accept Jung's formulation of the function of perception. Jung goes so far as to regard sensation and perception as identical, but perception, in my opinion, is more related to thought. Since by it, perception truth is tested. That's cognitive psychology now agrees with them. When that, because it puts object recognition and stuff within perception and attention. Again, here's a key part. Sensation is a much simpler and more passive mental process in which it is much more difficult to define the units of experience. So you could imagine it's what you see before you recognize it. Receptivity and reaction are here still closely related. If, however, sensation and reaction are regarded as a whole, there's an exact correspondence with those manifestations which many biologists describe as instinctive. Right, and then there's another book. I have another book for you. Instinct in Man by James Drever. Instinct in Man, 1917. All right. Right. What we got here? Oh yeah, my thoughts on thinking versus feeling. Again, a good bit from Van der Hoop. Feeling types do not like the impersonal objectivity at which thinking aims. That is how they're opposed. They're not necessarily opposed. It's only the impersonal objectivity that is the opposite of the subjectivity. There's many kinds of thinking that don't involve that, because someone can think about their feelings and not aim at that. You can get synergy. So impersonal objectivity is the opposite of feeling. So only a fraction of thinking is opposite feeling. Many times they work synergistically. And then this bit here, and then this is for probably how he thought Effie had become integrated into himself. But where there was greater freedom in thought, we get a morality founded on principles and reasons capable of giving rise to fresh insight into the life of feeling. Because he was a Jungian analyst. Then he became a psychiatrist. Right. Here. This separation of essence from aim of thinking allows for the subjective factor. Many people don't recognize that factor rooted in their premises. They mistake logical validity for soundness. They can honestly think that they are being objective because of that. And then Van der Hoop wrote here, I am myself convinced that all efforts towards objectivity have their limits. And anybody who knows proper philosophy, look at Immanuel Kant, a critique of pure reason. Right, so what have we got here? Instinct. Is that instinct and then the other cards? Right then, here we go. This is the good stuff. And notice here how similar this is to Kersey are looking at things at the whole type level. Right, emotions, expression of instinct. I was no longer able to accept you. Okay, emotional reactions are immediately bound up with sensations. Put your hand on a hot radiator. So-called feeling tone, together with reactions of liking and disliking, thus form with sensation a psychological entity. Here we go. On sensation types, in studying their mode of adaptation, which is how he phrases what a function is, he changes it into a verb, a cognitive process. Yeah, that's true. So divine strength, what are your demographics? Now, in studying their mode of adaptation, I saw, in fact, more and more clearly that they were not guided exclusively by their sensations, but by their sensations coupled with their emotional reactions thereto, and further by their instinctual needs as well. Look at the guardian instinctual needs, cautious protector, and the artisan instinctual needs. Just impulse, seek stimulation, value being audacious. It seemed, therefore, incorrect to me to regard sensation as the only characteristic factor in this function. Adaptation is here governed by emphases in regard to emotion and attention in the field of sensations, and that action is also directed by details of a concrete kind. Again, emotion and attention in the field of sensations. It's not just the field of sensations. Right, Dibblee. I will look at the Dibblee card because that goes into more detail. And then my definition, a unity of sensations, emotional reactions thereto, attention and action, which can manifest in a variety of ways, such as kinesthetic know-how and habit. There's another bit. Is that about intuition? Where he then... Oh, right. There's a little bit of contrast here with instinct. Here, it is not details of emphasis, but an attitude to the whole, which from the outset determines the forms taken by adaptation. In this respect, I can support Jung's observation that in intuition, any one content is presented as a complete whole without our being able to explain or discover in what way the content has been arrived at. But you can do that afterwards sometimes. Intuition is not felt as perception nor as a group of perceptions, but an insight into the significance of the whole of an experience. In the second place, I cannot claim as a characteristic that it arises in an unconscious way. Feelings and thoughts may also arise in an unconscious way, without thereby becoming intuitions. But I think that's useful, though, because I recognize the validity of archetypes. Is that more on instinct? Hang on a minute, I've just done that. Why have I got it twice? Maybe I added to it. Maybe one of these needs to be deleted. No, that's function. Right. Functions as activities. Again, units of behavior in Galenka. Activities directed towards certain modes of adaptation become more defined. So again, you can get the differentiation of functions. What was I going to show? This is the back. This is the back of the instinct in more recent notes. In intuitive experience, there was a spontaneous insight into the relation of a certain group of facts, as a result of which they assume that. Now remember his INTP like. So there's going to be his intuition is going to be, his definition of intuition will be influenced by that. This is something about his experience of it. This is quite something different from the practical instinctive knowledge which results from emphasis and sensation. Right, there we go. We now see the sphere of conscious instinctual experience as a mode of conscious orientation covering various items which nevertheless appear to us coupled with our emotional and behavioral reactions thereto, as part of a single experience, bringing with it a practical form of knowledge inseparable from the sensations involved. Emotional reactions to sensation are frequently accompanied by an impulse to act. In our conscious mind, this may assume various forms, e.g., that of a vague inclination to do something, or of a strong impulsive drive towards certain acts, artisans, especially SE DOMs, or there may arise a certain mode of behavior determined more or less by habit. It's more for your guardians. Then know-how. This is the really interesting bit. It is impossible to say that this form of knowing is chaotic. It is controlled by fixed associations of sensation and action. The original instinctual interest lending to things their primary meaning. Drever, again, James Drever. Right, thank you. Has led to further experiences as a result of which fresh emphases in the field of sensations are provided as secondary meaning. And these points attracting special attention are linked up by being associated together in practice. So that's more like a physical thing. And you've got like different parts of the brain involved with that, sort of like the cerebellum and the coordination of sequences and actions, and maybe the know-how associated with carrying out certain physical actions. It can be sort of put within that. And think of sports. I've done that one. What was I going to show next? Right, there's more stuff on my Dibblee cards. Dibblee was a good writer. He checked his. It's weird. He's like the 1920s version of Dario. Cards, Dibblee cards. Chapter 1 and chapter 2. Right. There's way too many notes. This is so packed, this book. Oh, it crashed. I'm going to open it again. Right. Dibblee is packed. Right. Instinct in red. Right. Right. And there we go. I state instinct is related to the concrete and that it is less verbal than intuition because instinct related to concrete actions. That's my own opinion. I also state intuition is related to the abstract and give examples. Right, so this is now Dibblee. And he's a good writer. Man is wont to use his reason to supplement and criticize his intuition, and rightly or wrongly he may turn again from the dictates of reason to appeal to his power of reflective intuition. And then this reads like KBN SE, Kersey, Berens, Nardi. They're all part of the same tree. Kersey taught Berens, Berens taught Nardi. And Berens, Nardi's definitions of functions, I've just shown you SE and SI. It's basically the essence of the temperaments. What do you mean shit posting? I take offense at that. I might even remove that. What do you mean shit posting? Who's shit posting? What do you mean? I could have a seance with the ghost of Dibblee and then tell him what you said about his work. Right. What do you mean shit post now? Right. I will read on until you write something, until you clarify your position there. Right. By a quite separate instinct, he may turn a deaf ear to reason and intuition and act in some ill-considered but immediately efficient fashion. That is what you can see with artisans. Again, in a crisis, act in some ill-considered but immediately efficient fashion. This is why you can get very bright ESTP resemblers who like act on impulse. Yes, Dibblee. George Binney Dibblee. There's your speller. Fair enough. Who are you, Spy Monkey 3D? What do you mean? Well, hey, you might have called it a stream of NE, but what's with the shit? Eh? Anyway. Alternatively, the same process may take place in a more sudden and unexpected manner when an individual, and this might be the experience of some SE DOMs. Yeah, I'll say hi back. Who's 4chan? Who are you, Spy Monkey? Right. Again, alternatively, the same process may take place in a more sudden and unexpected manner when an individual, before his reason has time to work or his intuition to produce intelligible results, may have been moved to summary action more promptly still by an unconscious instinct. So these split-second intelligent actions. And so you can see what instinct can give you. And then here's a bit. Intuition immediate, shall we say. Right. Like these two different kinds of intuition are interesting. Intuition immediate, restricted to the primary perception of self-evident truth. And then intuition reflesh, denoting a re-emergence of intuition as a governing mental factor after its results or conclusions have been studied and modified by intellectual criticism. So we could go like this. INTP has an intuition. They think about it, do all the TI, and then based on that, they have another intuition based on that reasoning. So I would then reframe that as reflection-based re-intuition compared to rethink. Right, so what's the next one? There's just loads in this book, and it's going to take ages to do notes. This is why my functions book would take ages. Right. Inspection, introspection, and insight greatly resemble intuition, and a form of insight is almost universally confused in popular use with a special meaning of intuition. Okay, he has a definite. So Van der Hoop would use the word insight via translation because it was translated by Laura Hutton, maybe. Van der Hoop, Dutch, writing in German, translated into English by Laura Hutton. So he would use the word insight, but Dibblee here doesn't like to use the word insight with intuition. So again, you got these little differences in TI, the subjectivity, and the subjectivity is in the premises, not in the rational elaboration of the premises. Right. Okay. That's interesting. Insight may perhaps best be described as an intellectualized quality of highly efficient active mental perception, capable of viewing and discovering obscure relations between facts outside themselves. Yeah, that sounds like NE. Or rather, NPs do that. Now viewed as NE, any max types being good at linking supports this claim. Dario has stated NPs are good at transcontextual thinking. However, this shows it involves thinking. Or la faculté, right? The ability that teaches us to see is intuition. Loads of this book is on this. Spontaneous insight into the relation of a certain group of. Oh, that's Van der Hoop. So he does use insights. That's good. I like this bit here. I like this bit. I like this bit at the bottom. Instinct is a privileged form of intelligence, not exposing its processes, but handing its ready-made results to the practical, efficient, willing, and motor self for use in competition with the more formal and pretentious diktats of slower moving intellect. This is what I mean about this puts instinct in at the same level as intuition. This special kind of intelligence. But again, you're going to see it in different degrees with people, just like with intuition. So instinct is a privileged form of intelligence, not exposing its processes, but handing its ready-made results to the practical, efficient, willing, and motor self for use in competition with the more formal and pretentious diktats of slower moving. So again, so motor selves, this is going to be in intelligent actions. Now, I would argue that this is biased towards artisan, kinesthetic intelligence, but I think, but on that subject though, Brian May, I think Dr. Brian May, PhD in astrophysics, I think I would classify him as like NITX, contender rational, INTJ, and he's very good at playing the guitar, so he's got pretty good motor skills, and I would classify him as an intuiting type. So it would be interesting to have him EEG'd. What's the next one? Unconscious elements of instinct. Okay, so this is a bit of the... Now, there is some evidence with this. It's like nothing has contradicted this in sort of newer literature about the limbic system and the thalamus. He definitely localizes instinctive activities, not in the cortex. Actually, it's not cortex. What he should have written is cortices. Cortices. Plural of cortex, because there's two hemispheres. And actually, cortex is either Latin or Greek for bark. As in on a tree. Because that's what it looked like. Less known features of the midbrain. Is it the midbrain? No, it's not. It's not really the midbrain. It's above the midbrain. It's just above the midbrain. It's part of the upper brain because the hemispheres grew out of the upper brain. Optic thalamus, yes, is the supreme center for instinctive reactions. So that's involved in the limbic system of the thalamus. Instinctive reactions, and I've read something more modern which described it as a sensory communications center, the thalamus. But it's going to be before any kind of recognition is going on. Any kind of recognition will be involved in the neocortices. There are many varieties of instincts. Yes, and that's something that we can get down into. Are we to talk of instinct or of instinct or of instinctive behavior? Lastly, is there an effect, a single faculty of instinct to balance the faculties of reason and intuition? Right, here we go. Nice little nuanced right. Nuanced. I like this bit. The meaning of instincts and intuition, when used as technical terms by serious writers, often overlap, but that is because the broad facts they represent do in fact frequently cover the same ground. That's well written. The broad facts they represent do in fact frequently cover the same ground. I want to give examples of the different facts which instinct and intuition represent covering the same ground, perhaps illustrating a situation where somebody gains a reading of someone's present intent via instinct based on concrete data versus somebody gaining an insight into someone's character and abstraction via intuition. Number one, present intent. A guardian might be more likely to draw a conclusion about someone's medium-term character than an artisan. Artisans are focused on the now and are situation-focused. Guardians like generalizations, which is consistent with super id NE or B-side NE, as I now call it, in the 8-function models of them. So again, temperament matters. What have we got here? I'll give you all my Dibblee notes today. Instinctive behavior sometimes, in my humble opinion, being related to impulses coming from unconscious motives. Maybe. Here we go. I put a big underline on that. We know about the habits of animals and we know something about our own instinctive behavior from observation. We can also build up strong inferences from bodily structure in animals and men, but we know next to nothing about the mental side of instinct. It is mixed up both with unconscious reflex and with conscious emotion. So again, he's put it with emotion, like Vanderhoop. Yeah, Vanderhoop fanboyed this book, sort of. That's how I found out about this book. Page 5. Vanderhoop. What did he write? Here we go. The problem of the mental functions as a whole has not received much attention from other investigators, and it is not possible for me to go into all the details. I will, however, mention a book here which to some extent deals with the same problem but in a different way. Instinct and Intuition, A Study in Mental Duality by George Binney Dibley, which, I regret to say, only came into my hands after I had finished this book. Dibley quotes the opinions of many philosophers, psychologists, and biologists, and he tries to find in the anatomy of the brain a reason for the opposition between instinct and intuition. In that respect, his work differs from my psychological investigations, but it may offer important amplifications. Right. We've got physio side of intuition. But we know nothing about its physical side in ourselves, nor for certainty where it takes place. Right. Nadia somewhat located it. Yeah, that's the thing. There's like it's not quite localization, and it's not quite delocalization with the way the brain works. It's tricky. It's tricky. Because areas join up with other areas, and they can sort of... It's tricky. It's not direct localization. And there's like whole brain states and wiring. But there are like you've got this visual cortex at the back, and you've got like Broca's area and Wernicke's area and temporal. And so there is a degree of localization. Oh, that's well written. Here we go. So, talking about instincts and intuition, friends they probably ought to be, owing to some common features in their natures, but the name of either is never quite applicable to the other. Hey, that's a good writer. Yeah, he was an editor on a newspaper in Manchester. So, writing about instincts and intuition, friends they probably ought to be, owing to some common features in their natures, but the name of either is never quite applicable to the other. Right. Instinct and intuition will be found to be not identical, chiefly on account of the strong physical relations of instinct. Right. Again, this is what I was saying before about instinct being related to the concrete. The strong physical relations of instinct as contrasted with the wholly mental relations of which we are aware in intuition. And this is why you get Kersey, he does that dichotomy, concrete versus abstract. Intuition is related to the abstract, instinct to the concrete, or instincting and intuiting. What's that, chapter 8? Okay. We'll show that to set them apart, merely as bodily phenomena on one side and mental phenomena on the other is too easy a solution. Bodily structure and instinct, either the optic thalamus relating to instinct. Is there another one? Here we go. Greater confusions to be cleared up on the boundaries of instinct. We shall have to understand why the psychologist on the one side cannot freely distinguish between instinct and emotion, and why the physiologist and the physician on the other cannot draw a firm line between half-conscious instinct and wholly unconscious reflex action. Oh yeah, was there a story about a bird? There was a comparison between a bird building a nest and then two human beings moving into a house, and the sort of the difference in consciousness, and how the bird was sort of like going through a programmed set of actions. Oh yeah. I got something now. So I got some examples of some intelligent behavior in birds being less intelligent than you think. So with a cuckoo, the parent bird reacts to seeing the red in the throat, and they put in and if they put in a yellow pencil with a red dot on it, then it reacts to the red dot. Sort of a reflex reaction to the red dot. Or there's the example of if you put a certain frog and surround it with flies that are dead, it won't eat them because it only goes towards an object that moves. So these kind of like simple brains, this is an example of reflex things. Instinct is neither emotion nor reflexive action. Agreed. It differs from emotion in that its processes are largely unconscious. Again, Dibblee van der Hoop differences. Processes are largely unconscious. Its processes. Yeah, sort of. Instinct, unconscious. It's like if someone's making split-second adjustments in, say, baseball or cricket, though it is aware of its conclusions and results. Okay, that's fair enough. It's like, so many of you out there typing on a keyboard. When you first learn to type, you have to make a lot of, yeah, but what about how the heck are magpies so smart? They've got small brains, but they have intelligent actions, magpies. So for example, what they'll do is, if there's stale bread, they'll pick it up and put it in the water and come back to it later. Or ones who like fishermen, or fisher people rather, water down. It's like on a rope. It's caught the fish, and they'll like bring up the. And then made a different bird, and then bring it up on the wire, and then eat the fish. All right. It differs from reflexes because it has conscious results and is aware that it's producing them, while reflex action, in man at any rate, has no conscious accompaniment from first to last. Right. Again, all these little distinctions. And again, this is like INTP, like all these distinctions that don't make any difference, really. You might eventually get to a point where it's like, right, similar perplexities. I love that word. I think I've done it in pink because I'm amused by the word. Similar perplexities relating to boundaries of function are offered for explanation with regard to intuition. Intuition often seems to shade off into clever guessing that may be called the human side of intuition. That may be called the human side of intuition. The other side is so indefinite that it may be called mystical or divine. There is no limit that is not attainable from the heights of inspiration at the base to the summit of the marvels of ecstatic vision. Everything there is possible. Yeah, this is how people write about intuition. There is no limit that is not attainable from the heights of inspiration at the base to the summit of the marvels of ecstatic vision. Everything there is possible. The resources of language and the capacity of memory limit what can be retained and the little that can be communicated to others. The inward confidence and security that remain are indescribable on the testimony of those who have experienced the loftiest flights above reflection and thought. All right. Okay, that's the first part. Is that all of them? Right. Those are the notes in chapter 1. Now, chapter 2. And I'll finish with this chapter. I don't even finish the chapter. There's so much. This is why if I did a functions book, there'd be loads of research. It might take years. That's why I did these notes. Here we go. More interesting stuff. It is not straining words to say that both intellect and intuition, the rival faculties of instinct, right, the rival faculty. Oh, right, sorry, no, I understand. Right, okay. Instinct and intuition, the rival faculties of instinct. Okay. It is not straining words to say that both intellect and intuition, the rival faculties of instinct, are each often set in motion by instinctive desires and emotions. Interesting. Right. So instinct can lead insight and intuition. Right. Are each set in motion by instinctive desires and emotions. Their operation may be often also suspended at will by the same controlling influences. There is a sense in which the word instinct is used above. There is a sense in which the word instinct is used above as a kind of multiple noun, denoting an aggregate of conduct and motive, wherein many mental states are mingled. Very good writer. An aggregate of conduct and motive, wherein many mental states are mingled. Right. The close association of emotion with instinct has no doubt an explanation due to the local contiguity of known impulses. Right. The large part also played in instinctive behavior by unit instincts embodies the mechanical side of instinctive activities. That's specific instincts. After this, I'll show you the list of appetites and instincts that Drever wrote about. Psychology has a share in it, which is not negligible, because emotion, beginning with instinct, carries instinctive feeling over onto the mental side. Emotion, beginning with instinct, carries instinctive feeling over to the mental side. Yes. Right. Yeah. Instinctive behavior may be said to sum up all the three aspects of instinct. Ooh, three aspects of instinct. Instinctive behavior represents the material of the unit animal and human instincts. Right. Focusing on the behavior aspect. It is the composite form of the intelligent instinctive activity regarded as a general source of human energy. It is the essential feature in all the crowd and mass movements, which are a significant phenomenon of the prevailing unknown in human nature. Yes, you tend to get a lot of elitism with people from this era, the way they wrote. Crowd and mass movements. Yeah. Instinct is essentially a form of semi-conscious, intelligent, autonomous mental operation, not far removed from a mental condition, which prompts and guides a form of conduct. Yes. Semi-conscious, intelligent, autonomous mental operation, which prompts and guides a form of conduct. Instinctive behavior is intelligent conduct of a kind, but not of the kind of action founded on conscious purpose. A typical pair of contrasted activities. Here we go. This is a good one. This is a good one. A typical pair of contrasted activities would be the building. If I'm doing notes in future, I'm typing the bastards out because this took me ages to write this neatly. A typical pair of contrasted activities would be the building of a nest by birds and the settling in a home by a couple of human beings. In the first case, instinct plays its part completely, and the practical aim appears at the end of a series of adjusted actions, all of which are stereotyped according to the inherited attitudes. In the case of house hunting or house building, a man and his consort, 1920s, a man and his consort would follow their... What's weird is that, was this one? No, this one wasn't translated by a woman, but Van Hoop's book was. In the case of house hunting and house, in his book is conscious orientation. Conscious orientation. Which people have not read, that they should have read. Even because it was quoted 10 times in Gifts Differing, but it appears hardly anyone's read the bastard. I only found out about it from Shalina. Maybe it was hard to get hold of. And it is still hard to get hold of. Instinct plays its... There we go. Stereotype. In the case of house hunting and house, but a man and his consort would follow their instinctive tendencies after mating with much more elasticity of means, choosing between minor instincts, reasoning and experimenting to an extent which only a firmer consciousness of their ultimate purpose would justify. Ooh, well written. Reasoning and experiment to an extent which only a firmer consciousness of their ultimate purpose would justify. Right. So because they're more conscious and understand the purpose of the instincts, there is more freedom of action rather than the stereotyped actions of, say, a bird or that frog that I mentioned. Like the bird that's just reacting to the red. And even though it's got, say, a cuckoo in there that looks completely different from the other chicks, it's just feeding when it sees the red throat. Because it's a stereotyped action. Right. And again, more on behavior. Dibblee on distinguishing between instinct and habit. Right. This is an important nuance. This is an important nuance. And again, with Guardians, the instinct to habit. Two, but not the same thing. Emotional reactions to sensation are frequently accompanied by an impulse to act. conscious orientation, so that's Van der Hoop. In our conscious mind, this may assume various forms, e.g. that of a vague inclination to do something, or of a strong impulsive drive towards certain acts. Artisans, trust, impulse. Or they may arise a certain mode of behavior determined more or less by habit. Guardians. From a cozy temperament point of view, we could state that guardians have an instinctual drive to be a creature of habit. They find security in it. In contrast, artisans have an instinctual drive to act freely and seek stimulation. Now look at this in Dibblee. Instinctive behavior resembles habit to such an extent that it has often been too easily explained by remains and others as a result of individual intelligence crystallized by prolonged habit. And then he talks about how that's not the case. Van der Hoop and KTM, Cozy Temperament Model, are not in Remain's camp. For Cozy Temperament Model, actions are predisposed by temperament. Dibblee raises two objections. Acquired characteristics cannot be transmitted genetically. The other objection is psychological, but nonetheless real, and that has been well expressed by the French philosopher Redefining. That objection continued. Is there any more after this? Oh, it's the last one. Then I'm going to put Driva on. It is not much of that. It is habit which resembles instinct by creating laboriously and imperfectly by experience. In a lifetime, a second nature of partially automatic actions in series, which only a slight shock to the system or even old age made by mere discontinuance are sometimes enough to wipe out, whereas instinct would last longer. In other words, the natural succession is from instinct to habit, and not, as is often supposed, from habit to instinct. Right. So, connections. So I'm trying to make connections to proper subjects. Right. I'm doing more on cognitive psychology in future. Now, Driva. James Driva, Senior. Right. I'll show you some context from his book, 1917. Right. Actually, I'll just... You can pause that. You can see the level of intellect going on here. Right. Right. Well, he studied German teaching methods and brought them to Scotland. Right. What else have we got here? Instinct and intelligence. Right. Again, 1917. Right. Meaning. Classification. Then trying to classify things. Now, what he does is he distinguishes between appetites and instinct. Right. But he says that actually, in practice, that the it's not as easy to distinguish between the two. Does he mention that here? What have we got here in Driva? Right. Emotional accompaniment. Well, I'll put a 2 there somewhere. Why did I write? I wrote 2, 3. Right. Okay. Oh, I think I'd write notes on that later on. Maybe. Well, we got very interesting. Unlearned reactions of pure instinct. Right, yes. An instinct to play. We could argue that there's that amongst children. Yeah, it was it was interesting education. Again, different kinds of instinct. Okay, yeah, I'll put those under SE. Hunting instinct, play interest in itself, needs to become emotional. It modifies emotion, right? What else? He mentioned, right. Varying degrees, right. Again, this is not a full analysis. This is just like a gentle analysis. Not the full deep analysis. Right. Right. So he makes a distinguish between appetites. So again, he puts like thirst, sleep, sex. Right, here we go. The appetite tendencies must be regarded, psychologically at any rate, as essentially individual. Oh, I classify that as interpersonal. Right, he's got these as appetite tendencies, but different from instinct. But right, and all part of the I've classified these as interpersonal instinct. Sex, imitation, sympathy for, suggestibility, acquisitive, gregarious, courtship is interpersonal. Now, where he wrote here though about, again, when you get these kind of distinctions and honesty, I tend to think the person resembles an introvert of thinking type with subsidiary intuition, or TIN for short. Right. We call these general because these tendencies are determined by nothing specific in any experience, except its pleasantness and unpleasantness. We should, however, be inclined to add these at least one tendency of an opposite kind. Unfortunately, there's no definite term to denote this except aversion. Wait a minute. No, Evo, appetite tendencies. Right, and it says that it's here, yes. The chief differences are the classifying both sex impulse and primitive disgust with the appetite tendencies rather than the instinct tendencies. Yeah, but then he says that through practice, though, it's not as clear a distinction between appetites and instinct. Right, anything else? I'm gonna stop now because I want to get under 2 hours so that I get a backup. I use a backup service that backs up videos that are less than mastering and submissive behavior. Again, it depends on instinct. Interpersonal and something. Individual instincts and interpersonal instincts. Appetite tendencies must be regarded psychologically. Oh yeah, I copied that before. What's this? More. Schneider. All right. For the German viewers, you have this. There you go. Please write down in a comment what that means. Please write that down what that means. So I'm going to stop now. So bye-bye, folks. So it's interesting what you said about energy. So when Trump says he has iron. Yes, I mean, ESTPs have a lot of energy. ESTPs have energy. ESTPs have lots of energy. Have. We don't know about have. Show lots of energy. Yeah. They generally do. But, you know, not all, but because other things might, but I would say that I have a preference to be active, an instinct for it. Again, context. Stop.